Good morning, good afternoon. For those of you on the West Coast, good morning. For those of you on the East Coast, good afternoon. Welcome to, I think, about our 13th or 14th webinar in this series now, which is awesome. So we've done our 10 steps. We've looked at how to pass our exam. Looked at critical path last time. And of course, all of those are available on our website. If you go to library webinars, as we record them, we post them up there. So if there's any that you missed along the way, you can go back and watch those. There's also a couple of other really good webinars there around change management, as well as resilience and leadership and coaching. So we've got quite a suite there for you to peruse. So I do encourage you to go check those out. Our session today is going to be on earned value, and I've subtexted it, I can see clearly now, and I think that'll kind of become apparent as we go. Okay, so as always, we're just going to cover off on some logistics as we get started. Our hosts today, of course, we have Lauren Connor supporting us as always. So if you're having any technical issues, please use the question box to type in your question or comments. We've already had a couple of ones in there, and she's expertly dealt with them. And keeping in mind, of course, if we do run into technical difficulties, these sessions are recorded, so you can always catch up on it later. If you are having, and I know it's kind of almost redundant saying this because if you're having difficulty you might not be hearing me, but you can always email as well. The sound and technology, oftentimes the sound is a little out of sync at first, so if you just give it a few moments, it usually sort of sorts itself out and gets back up to sync. So finally, our control panel, the red arrow at the top, this will collapse that panel down and expand it. So especially if you're on a single screen and you want a little bit more real estate, that can be a useful feature. We have the text box, or sorry, the maximize box, which will kind of bring it full screen, and then the raise your hand. So if you do have a question or a comment or something, please feel free to raise your hand. Lauren is monitoring those and will bring them to my attention as we go. And then finally, as always, these are interactive sessions. So when you see this icon pop up, it's your turn to provide some input, and what we'll be doing is using the question box to do that. So we'll be posting polls and questions throughout the session. Okay, so with no further ado, let's get going. Our opening thought comes from a gentleman named Jim Rohn, and basically Jim is kind of a self-proclaimed business philosopher. He's an entrepreneur and keynote speaker, that sort of thing. Anyway, so success is neither magical nor mysterious. Success is the natural consequence of consistently applying the basic fundamentals. And I thought this was really appropriate for our session today. When we look at, how can we create success, or more importantly, how can we regenerate and continue that success time after time, it's really through the consistent application of those fundamentals. So, we're looking at earned value, and a lot of people kind of label earned value as kind of more of an advanced topic, but I contend that it's actually more of a basic fundamental that we should be applying all the time. And as we go through our time today, we're going to be looking at earned value management, both from a conceptual part as well as from the tools that allow us to do that. So we'll be looking at it both from a concept level as well as the actual fundamentals for it. Okay, so our first poll for today, do you use/apply earned value management? And I've actually given you three options here, because initially I was thinking yes, no. So yes, you do report CPI, SPI, you do the formulas, that kind of stuff. The second one is sort of a halfway in between. You don't actually apply the formulas, but you do apply the concepts. And then finally, no, we do not apply EVM. So let's just pop that poll open. Thank you, Lauren. Ooh, we're getting some really fast response today. This is awesome. 70% voted. We'll wait till we get to about 80, 71. 73, 79. Tick, 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 tick. We should play some Jeopardy music while we do this. All right, so if you want to display the results, please. Thank you. So about 50% are not applying it, 37% are applying the concept and not the actual formulas, and then 13% are actually doing the formulas. So this is pretty much about what I expected. I was figuring probably about half of you aren't doing EVM at all. I'm really happy, though, to see that a lot of people are applying the concept, even if you're not doing the kind of formal part of the formulas. I think that's a really important piece, because even if I'm not doing the actual formulas themselves, there's still a lot of benefit to be had here. Okay. So my next question now then is why? Why are you doing it, and why are you not doing it? So depending upon how you answered, I would like to sort of get a little bit of feedback, and if you can pop those into your question box and type in your answers, and we'll read some of those off. And to save on a little bit of bandwidth, I'm going to shut off my webcam so you guys can focus and concentrate on the slides, and then I'll bring that back up when we come to the finish. Okay, so John said smaller projects. Sorry, John, if we can have a quick bit of clarification, are you talking about why you do not do that? Because it is a smaller project? Why not? Haven't learned about it yet. From Rick. Awesome. You're in the right place, Rick. From Justin, executive/projects teams are having a hard time buying into its use. Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it is one of those classic topics that, you know, if we don't get that buy-in, we don't get the you know, what's the benefit here, and if we're not getting any benefit, I totally agree we shouldn't be doing it. So hopefully by the end of this session you might have some ammunition to help have that discussion. From Peter, what is CPI, SPI? So, well, Peter, you're in the right place. We'll definitely go through those and you know, answer that question. Haven't learned it yet, so again, right place. Know the theory, but not how to apply it within our organization, from Andrea. So great question, and you know, I run into this one a lot. So we're going to take a look at, we'll give you some tips and tricks along the way about how we could potentially apply it. Most projects focus on cost, not value. Oh, interesting, Hitesh. You know, even those ones, I would actually counter that you should be using earned value. And you know, let's come back to that question at the end. Don't have an EVM system in place, corporate-wide, from David. Yeah, if you don't have one, then it makes it very hard. Why not? Really haven't heard about it. Hopefully we'll be applying to my project. Beautiful, again, right place. It's nice to have, but not need to have when you are very busy. Yeah, that's a bit of a bear trap, though, Larry. I hear where you're coming from, and you know, it's and to a point I agree with you, and it kind of depends on the project a little bit. And this is one of the common problems that we run into. We've got all these great, awesome tools, and meanwhile, it's like we don't have the time to get to them, which can be really annoying. So awesome. So let's see what we're going to go through our hour today, and you know, let's see what we come up with. Okay. So I found this animated graphic of a chameleon crawling along a branch, and then it sort of plays backwards. I find that project management, project reporting can often take on a bit of a chameleon aspect to it, because it's almost like it changes partway through. We thought we were doing good, and then all of a sudden, you know, I had this question one time years ago in a class where a person said, you know, how come my project's always under budget until right at the end, then suddenly they go over? All right, so here's what we're going to discuss today. We're going to start off with the concept, so we'll answer the question, what is EVM, earned value management? Often referred to as earned value analysis. And the earned value analysis and earned value management are actually different. Earned value analysis is the first step, and then earned value management is actually taking that data and doing something with it, so hence analysis. Then we get into why is it valuable, so we're going to have a quick discussion around that, and then we'll look at the application or the mechanics of it. Okay. So we're going to throw you right into our next question then. For those of you who are using earned value, or at least know what it is, what is it? Can you describe it? So I'm going to let a couple answers flow in before I start sharing some of those. I'm loving the nice succinct answer that I'm getting here. This is great. Okay, so a couple of the answers have come in. They're really kind of all the same. In very simple, short terms, it's plan versus actual. Now, one person said, actually plan versus actual, those words exactly, which is great. I love it. Then from Sandra, she said, work done versus work planned, which is great. And we've got cost spent versus cost planned. So we actually have two aspects to earned value, and this is really, in my humble opinion, why it is so important and so valuable, because we don't just look at, the dollars, are we on track budget-wise? We don't just look at the schedule. We look at a combination of both, right? So it's really about cost and schedule performance. So I think that's really a good way to describe it. Now, the next question that we have is, why is it valuable? So how come it is valuable? It's interesting. You go into different industries. There's an associate of mine down in the States we do a bunch of work with, and they have a new person on in their PMO who came out of Lockheed Martin, the aerospace defense contractors, and she was absolutely floored. She never fell off her chair when she found out that they didn't use earned value. It's like, what? You don't? Because if you're doing anything with the U.S. government, especially military applications, they live and die by earned value. It's just always there. So why is this valuable for efficiency? It's also great for monitoring for Justin, absolutely, because it's dealing with both time and money, absolutely. So there's the thing that I find with this, because dealing with time and money, and there it is. That's from Sandra. Thank you. To know the true status, and really that's the key, is really knowing the true status of where your project's at. And I find that earned value tends to have a bit of a love-hate relationship. People tend to either love it or hate it. So it's kind of one of those things where, when it works really well, and when it doesn't, and oftentimes people sort of give, an initial try at it, and they haven't put all the pieces in place really well. And so things don't quite work. And, it is definitely very much what we put in is what we get out. So let's sort of transition a little bit into more of the mechanics and more a bit of the low level here. Now, this is kind of adapted out of PMBOK. What I did is I took what PMBOK was saying, just really shortened it down. So earned value management, it's a methodology. It's to measure and assess project performance in very simple terms. Now, the performance that it's going to measure and assess is both on the dollar side as well as on the schedule side. And the way it measures it really gives us, I think, a more accurate picture. So let's take a quick look at the elements now. Anytime you're talking earned value, you need to identify the planned value, the earned value, and the actual cost. Your planned value is how much you have planned to get done. Now notice I'm actually saying how much you plan to get done, not how much you plan to spend. And there's an important difference here, and this is going to become more apparent as we work through this. Our earned value is what we've actually gotten done. Right? So this is what we have completed, or what we have earned. What tangible products do I have in hand that really signifies that progress? My actual cost, well, there's no surprise there. It's the actual cost. Now, these are just the core elements. They're the kind of raw data. Now, we're going to take this raw data, we're going to do some comparisons around with it, and we're going to come up with variance and performance index. And variance is really how far off are we. So if my plan says I should be here, let's say my plan says I should be at $10,000, worth of product, but I'm actually at $8,000 worth of product. Well, I'm off by $2,000. Now, you notice I'm using the term dollars. The planned value, the earned value, and the actual cost are all expressed in terms of dollars. And the reason we do this is so that we get them effectively into the same currency, so that we can make sure that we have like to like in our comparisons. So the variance is how far off are we, and then the performance index is really a percentage of how we're doing. So it's really about efficiency. You know, are we running at 80%? Are we running at 90%? Or are we running at 110%? Which would be, you know, we're performing better than we had planned to. So, you know, what does that performance index look like? Now, the beauty with doing this, especially on the performance index, is that I can take that performance index and I can apply it back to my plan and forecast where I'm actually going to finish. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a very simple project, and I call this my super silly simple scenario. And in my super silly simple scenario, we're going to build 10 widgets. Now, the classic widget, at least when I was growing up before the smartphones and all the fancy gizmos these days, a widget was a nonsensical device that we would use for accounting discussions or business discussions. So it's a kind of nonsensical thing. So I found a picture of a man with a radio hat and thought, okay, well, this will represent our widget. So we're going to build 10 of these widgets. And our project is going to take us 10 weeks to complete, and we have a budgeted cost of $10,000. So it's, you can see, a very simple linear project, one widget per week, $1,000 a widget. So here's my status. We're at week 3. We've built 2 widgets, and we have spent $2,500 of actual cost. So the simple question now is, how is my project doing? And just to qualify this as you're answering, in our super silly simple scenario, there is no learning curve. So the first widget takes as long and costs the same amount as our last widget. Now, recognizing that you know, real world, there would be learning curve, there would be, you know, those sort of factors that start to come into play. Those would be represented in our S-curve through our project plan, or at least they should be, for the purpose of this so that we can focus on the formula. So what is the status of our project? How are we doing? Okay, so Justin's already answered correctly. Thank you, Justin. I'm gonna hold off on saying anything till, you know, we get a few answers in, and Andrea's in there. Perfect. Yes, awesome. So really, kind of what I'm looking for is how are we doing in 2 factors? How are we doing budget-wise? How are we doing schedule-wise? Let's give it another few moments. Yep, and there comes the flow of answers. Okay, and everyone, it's funny, I use this scenario in my classes, and some of those, oh, nice answer, Nicole. Let's talk about that. I use this scenario in my classes, so if any of you have attended my sessions, you might have seen this before. But 100%, everyone always gets this one nice and right. It's really easy to see with such a simple project. We are behind schedule. We're 1 week behind. We're at week 3. It's 1 widget per week, so it's a no-brainer here. We should have 3 widgets. We're at $2,500. We know that we should be spending $2,000 per widget. We've got 2 widgets, so we're over budget, right? We're behind schedule, over budget. Now, Nicole's answer was, would look like we're behind budget / schedule, which is true, but we could pick up efficiencies, right? And immediately we're always jumping to those solutions, right? We're jumping to those, how do we fix this, which is awesome. However, we also need to ask the question, do we need to fix it? And something that we've explored in our previous webinars, and a couple of them we explored, was the whole concept around priorities. Okay, so where are our priorities on the project? So if this was a regulatory type project, if this was or what I often refer to with regulatory projects, I often call them Y2K projects, we have a firm fixed deadline that's externally imposed, so we don't have control over that deadline. You know, we're going to want to pick up the pace and get on track schedule-wise. Since money in those projects is not the #1 priority, likely oftentimes what we end up doing is we put money onto the project to get things done. Now, if the money is the #1 priority here, I need to figure out some way real quick to stop the bleeding. Because if I let this continue, it's just only going to get worse. However, that might be at the expense of our schedule. So if we can kind of visualize the classic triangle with our our time, our cost, resources, and scope budget, our scope quality, we want to look for that balance. Okay, but really what we're talking about with earned value management is how are we actually doing, and you're absolutely correct. We're behind schedule, we're over budget. Now what we're going to do is we're now going to run the numbers. Okay, so for our performance index, we're going to take our status or our project plan, our 10 weeks, our 10 widgets, our $10,000. We're going to take our status of week 3, 2 widgets, $2,500. And the first thing we need to identify is what is the earned value. And the earned value is based on the original estimate of what it costs to complete that work or that work package. So in this case, because we had budgeted and planned $1,000 per widget, regardless of what it's actually costing us, every time we complete a widget, we have $1,000 worth of earned value. So with our 2 widgets created, we now have $2,000 worth of earned value. Our planned value is at $3,000 because we had planned at this point to have $3,000 worth of product on hand. And then our actual cost is $2,500. Now, the actual cost comes from your accounting system. It comes from your reporting, it comes from your timesheets, it comes from your accruals, whatever systems are in place for you to get that data. So if we're going to go down this path and start to do things like earned value, we need to think about what mechanisms do we have in place to gather that data. Now, one of the comments that was made about why they don't do earned value is because of the inexact nature of estimating at the beginning. So you're absolutely right. If we have garbage in, we have garbage out. If we're going to go down the path of earned value, it can be very illuminating as to how good we're doing at our estimating. And if we want to up that game, we need to make some investments on the front end. And those investments are often difficult to justify. So for our scenario, our earned value is $2,000, our planned value is $3,000, and our actual cost is $2,500. Now we're going to do our SPI, or Schedule Performance Index, first. And our Schedule Performance Index is to take our earned value, which again is what we've accomplished. We're going to divide that by our planned value, which is what we plan to accomplish. So in this scenario, we're taking 2,000, we're dividing it by 3,000, and we're getting 0.67. So in effect, what we're saying is, from a schedule perspective, we're running at about 67% efficiency, 100 being perfect. So if we had 3 widgets in 3 weeks, we'd be at 100. Now, if we had 4 widgets in 3 weeks, we'd be at, 133%, I think. So, no, actually, be 120%. I'd have to do the math. But it'd be over 1. It'd be 1 point something. And that tells us that we are actually performing at a rate which is better than what we had planned. So a simple rule of thumb here is that 1.0 is perfect, right on. Anything less than 1 is bad. Anything greater than 1 is actually good, right? And the same holds true for our cost performance index, which tells us how we're doing cost-wise. Earned value divided by actual costs, so we take our scenario here, we take 2,000 divided by 2,500, we get 0.80. Now, 0.80 means we're running at about 80%, so for every dollar we're spending, we're creating about 80 cents worth of product, right? So for every day we're spending, we're creating about 67 or 0.67 of a day worth of product, if you will. So when we take a look at that and we layer that back to my earlier question, and I said, how are we doing? And absolutely everyone said we're over budget, we're behind schedule, right? You're 100% right, but now we actually have a quantified number which shows us exactly how far behind we are, and this number is actually expressed in a percentage. Now the other calculation that we can do is called variance, and variance is the difference or how far off it is, and currently our schedule variance and the formula for that is EV minus PV. So we're $1,000 of variance, and we are $500 worth of cost variance. So there was from Andrea, I think you said, 1 week behind, so $1,000 in this case represents a week, $500 over budget, right? Now, the variance is great when you want to look at trends. Okay, so if I have been doing this every week, now I'm at week 3, I would have 2 data points, because the first week, I should have 3 data points, right? Because I'd have week 1, week 2, now week 3, I have 3 data points. And granted, weeks is probably too frequent a time frame, but again, it's our super silly simple scenario. So, if I was in a real project and I was doing my calculations monthly, now I would have, 3 months worth of data, and I can kind of see what the trend is starting to do. Did I have this initial step out of cost at 500, and I've been maintaining that over the next 2 months? Did it start at 100, then go to 300, then 500? So I've got a sort of constant build. Was it, bang on for the first 2 periods and then suddenly jump to 500? Start to look at that, and of course, as we do that, we would start digging behind the scenes and really uncovering, what the heck's going on here. Okay. Now, this all looks good and great, but really, the variance, especially at a point in time, is not that valuable to senior management. It's not that valuable to our sponsor. They really want to know, where are we going? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how can we use this. Now, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is a concept called BAC, which is budget at complete, which in our case for our project is $10,000. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply our cost performance index to that budget and focus or predict how much it's going to cost us to complete the project. So assuming that we maintain our current pace of delivering cost at 80% efficiency, we're going to need $12,500 to complete our project. So we're going to need an additional $2,500 on top of the original $10,000 already budgeted. So with this data in hand, we can actually go to our sponsors, go to our senior management, and have that discussion. We can do the exact same thing with our duration. So our duration was originally 10 weeks. We divide it by our schedule performance index. It works out to 14.93 weeks. And yeah, we would round that off to 15 weeks. But now you have the data to be able to go and have the conversation with your sponsor with some, projections, some forecasts to say, what, based on how we're tracking now, here's where we're going to finish. And the simple question you want to ask at this point is say, what do you want to do about it? Okay, or more correctly, I should say, is what do you want me to do about it? And if I understand my priorities well before I have that conversation, I'm going to be walking in with those suggestions and options, and I'm going to walk in and say, okay, recognizing that this is a hard stop deadline project, it's a it's a regulatory type thing. We have to deliver in the 10 weeks. Unfortunately, our current schedule performance is not doing well, and we're already over budget. So, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z to be able to get us back on track. Maybe we add in another shift on the build crew, or hire some more team members and, up that, or maybe we outsource something, right? And of course, all of those options are costing us money, aren't they? Now, if cost is my #1 priority and I have flexibility on my time, the conversation is exactly the same, except it's like, how do we stop the bleeding? We're only at 500 over. Let's cap it there. And, oh, by the way, to be able to do that, we've done this and this adjustments, and, if we go to 16 weeks, we can cap that cost by doing X, Y, and Z. So it gives you the information to not only have a clear picture of how your project is doing, but also to have that intelligent conversation. Now, a lot of people, I find, when we first, go through this, they go, wow, that looks really cool and that's really great, but really, how do I operationalize this? How do I turn this into something tangible? And you've probably seen graphs like this one, right? Now, this graph is an S-curve. Okay, so it's your classic S-curve. We're going to talk about how to create the S-curve in a moment. This line right here, the PV line, this one really represents our original project plan, hence PV, it's the project plan, right? Now, the EV line, this one here, okay, this represents our accomplishments, or what we've built, and our AC line, our actual cost line, is what it's actually costing us. Now, I'm not going to give you any numbers, because you actually don't need the numbers, but can you tell me how this project is doing? And sorry, just as you think about that, you'll notice we have a status state here, which is what this vertical line represents, and then there's some graphics to show you the schedule variance, cost variance. And these two lines here of actual cost and earned value are projecting forward to what we think where we think it's going to end. So just type into your question box, how do you think this project is doing? And let's be specific. So Mark, great, you're absolutely 100% correct, but I want to be a little bit more specific. So specifically schedule and budget, how am I doing? Yep, you guys are getting it, absolutely. It's still good. Nice one, Mark. All right. So the answers are coming in fast and furious, and yes, it's we're under budget and we are ahead of schedule. Okay, so we are building faster than we had planned to build, and we can tell that because the earned value line, this guy here, right, is above our planned value. So if I look at this point in time here, I plan to have this amount done. I've actually got this amount done, so I'm getting more done than I had planned to get. Right? Now I do the same sort of thing with our actual cost. So again, if I'm looking at this point here in my what I've actually built, I have to go all the way down here to see how much that cost me. So I built this much and it only cost me this much. So my schedule is doing good, and so is my cost. So if I actually look at my status state, you notice that the cost line is actually starting to catch up a little bit. So this variance has actually decreased a little bit, but we're still in good shape. This is how much I've spent, this is how much I had planned, and this is how much I've actually created. And the key here is that I'm comparing this one to this one, and I'm comparing this one down to this one. Okay. Now, a couple of you said I'm in an underspend situation, which 100% we are, but be careful on that terminology because you can be in an underspend and still be in an over budget. And we're going to come back to that concept in a few moments. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about creating that S-curve, because without this baseline S-curve of plan value, we've got nothing. Okay. Now, when we say the word budget, and we explore this in detail in step 6 of 10 of our series when we talked about budgeting, when we say the word budget, what we're really saying is what is your time-lapse spend over the life of the project, hence what is your S-curve. Now, this is actually the scenario that I pulled out of our Step 6 webinar. And we talked a little bit about how to create the S-curve. So here's basically what happens. We take our Gantt chart, okay? And then what we would do is we would put dollar values against each of these elements. Okay, so each of these work packages, wow, I can really draw nicely. We take those, then we take those dollars and we carry them down here for each period so that I can eventually figure out what is my total spend for that period, and then hence what is my cumulative spend. And folks, honestly, this is a very simple cumulative spreadsheet. We've got the individual categories broken down. So we got labor, materials, equipment. In this case, we had movers, we had contractors. We're putting in those values and then just adding them up vertically. So we'd add them up here to get our period total. We add it up this way to get our, our cumulative. It's that simple. Now, once I've done all of that, I would then simply chart the cumulative number. So I take this cumulative line and chart it. So I end up with this S-curve. And the reason we call it an S-curve is because 99 times out of 100, it goes into the shape of an S. Okay. Now that I have this S-curve, this is my plan value. Now all I have to do is add in the actuals. There's my actual cost. Okay. The tricky part, and it's actually not even tricky, is to figure out how to calculate your earned value. Well, I'm just going to take a quick step back here. Now, in this first period, Okay, so here we have a project that's going to be 12 months. We've got a 1-year project. It's pretty short. So in the first month, so doing my reporting for the first month, I've got this work package. So I've got R2, I've got M1, I've got R1, I've got L1, and I've got L2. Okay, so all of those cumulatively add up. Now, let's assume for the moment that M1 is 100% done. R2 is also 100% done. R1 is 50% done. L2 is 100% done. And L2 is 33% done. So yes, they're all on track. My earned value would match this number here. Okay, so if I jump forward, let's say to end of month 3 here, drop my status line down here, I had planned to spend $10,000. Okay, now assuming that all of these are on track and actually what I planned to accomplish within that time period has been accomplished, I have $10,000 worth of earned value. Now, if I have 100% here on L2, 100% on R1, 100% on R2, 100% on M1, and 100% on L2, but I haven't yet started R3, I'm going to have something slightly less than $10,000. Let's say I have $9,000 or $8,000, or whatever this dollar amount comes out to. So this gives me a quantified amount of how much I'm behind schedule. Okay. Now, some of you may look at this and say, "Well, dude, hold on a second. You got float. So we're actually not behind schedule." And yeah, I would agree with that. If you have, readjusted your project baseline and said, "You know what, we're starting R3 late for whatever reason," it's within the float, so we don't need to replan or rebaseline our project. But what you do need to do is take this guy and move him out, and then rerun these calculations, so that you don't get a false indicator that you're actually behind schedule when you're not. Now, if this was not fully done, okay, so I'm just going to put a little X through here. If this was not fully done, now we're actually, we're behind schedule, right? So this is why it's so important when you get into doing earned value to make sure that you are keeping your project baseline up to date and correct. Okay, because we need to make those adjustments. So assuming that you have, with a proper appropriate authority approval, shifted R2 out, you're into using part of the float, you've got approval to do that already, based on the initial plan, and you've shifted it out and everyone's, happy with that, awesome. Rerun your numbers and then, take a look at how it works. If L2 is not fully complete yet, let's say it's only at 50% or 60%, okay, now we're behind schedule. Right, and then you need to kind of figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to, deal with that situation. Now, we move forward, and again, we take a look at our plan value. If I make adjustments to the Gantt chart, the plan value S-curve will hence correspondingly adjust. But in doing so, we're getting a more full picture. Okay. So some key points that I want to take out of this is first and foremost, focus on accomplishments, not activity. Okay? Because the reality is, if I'm not comparing my status against what I have built, I'm getting a false picture. What costs money and what takes time is the accomplishments. Now, you look at that and say, well, fine, Dave, that's great when you're dealing with physical product like widgets. Well, the reality is, I didn't say what these guys. Hold on, here we go. What these were, right? L2 could be a report, right? It could be a piece of data, or it could be, physical product, right? Like R was renovations, I think, if I remember correctly. And then M was moving, and L was location, and so regardless, whatever it is, when I've completed that thing. Now, when we talk about doing work breakdown structures, when we talk about doing planning, hard to build something before you get material. Totally agree, Peter. When you start to so this first one here where I don't have any materials, these are all like investigate, locations, get contract signed, things like that. But when we look at, the acceptance criteria of a work package, and you identify what does it mean when that work package is done, and it might be in the form of a signed contract, or the report has been created and handed off for review, or the code has been written and is now ready for testing, or whatever that is when it's not a physical product, right? So this still does work. It holds its model, right? Get the full picture, okay? And then report in appropriate language, because I think the other challenge that a lot of people run into is they get into this very technical thing, and oh, awesome, we've got a number, CPI and SPI, and you see, PMs around the water cooler going, hey, how's the SPI in your project? And, we get that, right? But consider the audience who you're talking to, because when you start reporting this up the food chain to, senior management, who are the, as I like to refer to, the non-PM savvy types, that whole technical language could be a little misleading. All right, so let's revisit our status. Week 3, $2,500. How are we doing? So I get y'all to just type in, how are we doing? Yay, not as many people are falling into my trap as I had hoped. Beautiful, I'm loving these answers. So oftentimes when I do this in class, having gone through all the formulas and everything, I cover up the widget accomplishment and say, how are we doing? And everyone says, oh, we're under budget. And meanwhile, we're not, because you know what? The reality is you cannot compare week 3 to $2,500. That will tell you you're in an underspend situation, but it won't tell you what you've accomplished. And you need to compare that to what you've accomplished. So most of you, congratulations, you came back and said, actually, oh no, we're still, and the first answer back was, how are we doing? Poorly. I did get 1 or 2 of you fall into my trap, but I also did have a few of you who came back and said, how many widgets have been built? What have we accomplished? So you're questioning that, and that is the base concept to this. If you're going to ask this question of how we're doing, you have to take this into consideration. Now, Kathy, just to respond to your question, this doesn't consider learning curve. 100% it doesn't, no. Because what I did is I built that into my project plan that there was no learning curve. Okay, so if there was learning curve, my project plan would not be that straight linear line that I'm giving you with the 10 widgets, 10 weeks, $10,000. It would be more of a curved line, and with that would take into consideration learning curve, right? And if I've done a really good job on my project plan, instead of having a straight line project like I have here, I would have a curved line here where those first couple widgets are taking me longer. I get faster through the middle, at which case then my CPI, SPI, and my variance are holding true to how we're going. So yes, I took learning curve out of the scenario so that we could just focus on the concept. So when we look at project status reporting, we really need to tie it back to the how much have we built, how are we doing, and take us back to our friendly little chameleon. Now, I love this graphic. My wife actually came up with this one for me because it's actually not a chameleon. This is actually this is a piece of performance art, and what we have here is actually 2 ladies with body paint pretending to be a chameleon. So here is the head of one lady, and then the head of the other is over here lying in the opposite direction. So we can see the first lady's body goes this way with her feet down here. The second lady's body goes this way, and then her feet are up here to create the crown of the head. Why did I choose to use this? Because I think this really epitomizes when we don't have that clear picture, we get a false image of our project status. Okay, So and besides that, it's just a really cool graphic. So I was like, okay, how do I use this in one of my webinars? All right, so coming back to our opening thought, success is neither magical nor mysterious. Success is a natural consequence of consistently applying basic fundamentals. And I've run into this concept of the consistent application many times because, yes, we need to consistently apply, because if we're not consistently applying, we're adding a variable in there. And if we can consistently apply, then the variations from our performance can now become something that we could actually see, measure, and react to. When we start changing too many variables, now the question becomes, okay, if I just went and changed 5 variables, which of those changes is giving me the impact that I'm getting, be it positive or negative? So I kind of really liked that quote, so thought that was a good one to both start and end with on this one. So if we can consistently apply the basics, then we can start to see what the true trends are. And I do agree that, estimating in itself is not only a science but an art. And it's very difficult to do that, and that's often compounded with operational issues. But the reality